Welcome everyone. It's really nice to see that the participants numbers are growing. I will just introduce myself a little bit. I'm the co-author of the Helbling Readers blog, and I'm also an assistant professor in English Applied Linguistics. And in my teaching, I work with higher education students now, but I used to work quite a lot with primary school and secondary school students as well. So I hope I have a good overview actually of the whole scene for you. I have a special interest in multimodality genre pedagogy, and I really like taking my students to museums and working with picture books, even in higher education. So let's get started. All right. So today we are going to talk about social and emotional development in young learners with stories. And in my talk, I'm going to use examples from the Helping Young Readers and the Thinking Strange series. These are two separate series. I don't know how familiar you are with these two series, but you will see examples from both of them. And then you can check them out on the website. But I think as a general comment, you can use all these ideas with any sort of picture books that you would like to use. So just feel free to adapt my ideas and use them with any kind of resource that you are working with. All right. So this is the plan for today. We are going to do some warm-up activities and talk about storytelling in general. Then we have a quick look at the social emotional learning framework, and I will tell you about where you can look for meaning in picture books. We will see how you can read for social emotional skills, and I will give you a specific example from a picture book I really like from the Helping Young Readers series. It's called The Dark in the Box. And then I will give you 3 more activities to work with emotions and some title recommendations. So to get started, in the chat box, could you just tell me if you are already using young readers regularly in your teaching? Hi, everyone. So are you using young readers in your teaching or picture books? Yes. Very nice. Yes. So I see I have teachers with lots of experience here already. Okay, good, good. Thank you so much. All right. So as the first activity, I'm looking at the webinar chat as I'm speaking. When you look at this image, what do you think the situation is and how many different feelings are there in this single page? What's the first feeling that comes to your mind and what's the situation? Angry. Yeah, exactly. And why is he angry? Why do you think he's so angry and upset? Yeah, maybe the red card. Yeah, yeah. All right. Thank you. We are moving on to our next image. From the same picture book, I have a new image for you. This is the final double page. So what's happening here now? How have feelings changed? What's the situation now? Happiness, celebration, exactly, and excitement and some sort of victory. Good. We are just getting into the mood of talking about picture books here if there are some latecomers. All right. So who do you think is the main character in this story? And how do you know that? How do you know? Who is the main character? There's the boy. And how do we know that he's the main character? Number 11. Exactly, it's the boy and it's his t-shirt, but also he comes in the front. That's very true because he is in both pictures. Some really good answers are coming in. Okay, so why am I asking all these questions? One reason is that when we are talking about picture books here today, I have two main goals. One, I would like you to understand how you can look at picture books in general for your own sake. And the second reason is that I'd like you to have a perspective on how you can guide your students when you're talking about different picture books and stories. So I have a double purpose: to help you look more carefully and then to help your students look with you more carefully. All right. Then warm-up activity 2. Now we look at gestures. What are the gestures here? What are they like? Proud. He's proud of himself. But the students are surprised. He's happy. So this one is from a Thinking Train book. These books are a bit different in their pedagogical kind of purpose, because they focus more on thinking development through storytelling. So the students are surprised, but Mr. Evans is quite proud of himself and he's quite happy. Good. And now if we look at here, what has changed? It's a different situation and a different scene. So if anyone is arriving now, joining us now, we are still talking about just some introductory images. There are some really happy children. And how has the teacher changed in the background? How is he feeling now? He's wondering. Yes. Don't we all feel like him sometimes? Okay, good. So yes, the feelings change quite a lot in these stories, and even without reading the text, the students will understand and you will understand that something is going on with the feelings, and you can start working with the images and start building vocabulary through the images. So here, I don't think that you actually read the story at this point. We will get to that as well. But at the beginning, when we are looking at picture books, it's really important that we focus on the general meaning in the gestures and in the general kind of feeling that we can sense by looking at the pages. Now, here's a different gesture. This is again from a young reader. What's going on? How is the boy feeling here? What's going on in this picture? He's worried and scared. And we might not know why he's worried and scared, and this is where the text will come in. And if you look at the text, you will understand that there's something going on with some seeds. And if you look at the title, you will know that he has some sunflower seeds. And you can start guessing, like, why is he scared? Why is he looking at the pot? And what's going on here? All right. And how is the boy feeling now? Yes, and how do you know? Because it's all in the gestures and it's in the body language. Here again, even without reading the text, the students will immediately understand what's going on. And who are the other people? Who do you think they are? His family. And the family, how are they feeling? They are also really proud and they are really happy for him. Good. Let's move on. How does this picture make you feel? And how does it achieve this kind of feeling? How does it make you feel happy? Probably through the colors, I would say. Probably because of the gazes and the gestures of the people. Maybe we want to do the same and we want to be happy for him. We saw how scared he was and how worried he was about that little sunflower seed. And now we can see that he's really proud because he has achieved something and how pretty it is. So it's good. It's a really nice feeling. All right. Now, another perspective when we are looking at picture books and scenes in picture books and talking about feelings is looking at colors. Here, the colors are really, really powerful. What are the colors like here? They are pretty dark, exactly. But you will see some contrast. Some had really dark, but there is meaning in the light as well. But the most powerful feeling here is darkness and sadness, and probably some kind of fear. And yes, you are saying hope. As I said, there is some meaning in that little light, giving of some hope. We will work a bit more with this story. I just wanted to see you that in some books, colors are foregrounded as meaningful resources. So you can start thinking about not just in terms of gestures and feelings, but also through colors and how what kind of situation they create and how do they make you feel in the stories. And finally, this is the only like classic picture book. You might be familiar with The Velveteen Rabbit. Here we are not really talking about colors, although I must say that the colors are quite nostalgic and they create a special atmosphere. But here I would like to draw your attention to like the organization of the whole page. So where are you looking at when you look at this double page? What draws your attention? Where do you look first? Your toys? And when you're looking at the toys, you look at the rabbit. Yes, and the rabbit. And where do you go from there? It's the rabbit because it's the title, but it's the rabbit also because it's in the corner. And if you look at the carpet, it might be really implicit, but in a way there is the carpet acts like an arrow, drawing your attention, and then there's a point and it is showing a direction towards all the other toys. So this is the kind of thing when you remember I told you that I will guide you through like looking together at these images. And this sort of information, like how visual information explicitly directs your attention, is something that the students don't need to really know about, but it's really interesting for us to know that there are these kind of compositional elements which will really guide our attention. Good. Now, let's move on and talk a little bit about, like, we have talked about all these emotional meanings, really, emotional meanings in stories. Now, I have collected some ideas I have in terms of social and emotional skills and why they are so important, and why it is so important to look for them in stories. Because when we are building language skills and when we are developing language and kind of cultural skills in our students, we also want them to grow socially and emotionally, of course. So why are they so important? They start after birth, and it's right after birth we start recognizing happy and sad faces and express feelings. And then it's really important if you want to make friendships and just relationships. Empathy is a really important thing, and they will help us with reduce stress when we understand our emotions, and it will be easier to resolve conflicts, respect others, as I said, become more empathic. They will help us deal with social expectations, being aware of others, lead a generally healthy emotional life. And these skills are needed all through our lives. So when we are working with social and emotional skills from young age, even with young readers, we're using stories at their level and age appropriate and language level appropriate stories, then we are actually helping them develop very important skills that will guide them all through their lives. Now, the social emotional learning framework. The social emotional learning framework has 5 core competences, which are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. And in a nutshell, and I really don't want to talk too much about this aspect, but it's an educational approach, and it puts emphasis on the development of special emotional skills by understanding and managing emotions, building healthy relationships, and making decisions. And by somehow integrating the social emotional learning framework in our own teaching, we are promoting positive learning experiences and emotional intelligence. So all in all, when we are doing this, we are not just creating a more engaging learning situation or environment, but we are we are working on some really important extra and skills as well. So let's look at some good reasons to use stories. And I'm going back to the chat box because I'm interested in your motivation for using stories in the classroom. If you can just tell me in one word or a phrase, like, why do you use stories in the classroom? What's your main pedagogical? Exactly. Values to motivate students for grammar and vocabulary. Thank you so much. To create context. Exactly. To get students engaged, creativity to teach moral values. Make them speak or write. As I see, it seems like the stories are good for everything, and good storytelling will give you 100 good reasons and good areas for development. Thank you so much. I wish I could, and I might even collect all your answers and analyze them, because it's fascinating what you're saying about storytelling. Thank you. Now, just one more question and then we will move on. What's your favorite story to use in the classroom? I think we all have favorite stories to share with our students. Mystery and history. Yeah. Do you have a specific title? There you go. Lots of fascinating answers. The students are quite lucky to have you, I think. Peter Rabbit is amazing. All right, you can keep writing these if you remember any stories that you like, because when I can look at the comments, I will really enjoy looking at your answers. Thank you so much. All right, so it's always interesting to think about, like, what's in a story and how do they work, because stories will help us make sense of the word and also build knowledge at the same time. And they are also a bit like time organizers. This is how we organize time around themselves and make sense of everything that's happening around us. So I do think that for interactive and dialogic learning and for immersive learning, storytelling will always remain, as it has always been, one of the most powerful resources teachers have. So let's move on and look at some more reasons. So stories are practically the most natural way of learning. They are accessible for everyone. You don't even need a lot, because you can just practice oral storytelling, and they are also memorable. I have collected some ideas here to show you. So stories build knowledge and language at the same time, but they also create situations and thus give us context. They work with emotions. They also show us how relationships work and how people solve problems and deal with difficulties. And they also show us a lot about a certain culture through creating both the context of culture and the context of situation to learn actually new vocabulary and new expressions. So all in our stories will cover all these areas of language, cultural, social, and emotional development. Okay, and one last thing. What do you remember about your favorite picture book from your childhood? The good ideas? So what do you remember about your favorite picture book? And you can also share what it was that you really liked. The images, colors, and the colors. The colors are really powerful, and turning the pages. Thank you. Quite a lot of you are talking about images and colors and the illustrations and the drawings, how important they were. Exactly, especially picture books. All right. Very interesting answers here again. So when we are picking stories for our own teaching, I think I like going back to my own reading experiences and think about what I enjoyed as a child or when I was learning languages, because I think that can really show us how stories work and how they become memorable. All right. So the two kinds of picture books I am talking here are the Thinking Train series books and the young readers. And I have used examples from these titles mostly. And now we will move on and focus on two readers specifically. So when we look at picture books, it's really interesting to think about like where is the meaning in them. When you look at this picture, this is from the Velveteen Rabbit. I chose this one because I think that most of us are familiar with this story and we like reading this story. So when you look at it, what's the most powerful resource in the double page? What's the most powerful element that draws your attention? Like imagine that you are, yes, it is quite sad, I agree. So there's the book, The Rabbit. Everybody's looking at the rabbit, I think. So there are two faces right in the middle looking at each other. Then the rabbit is quite salient and quite eye-catching in a way. The rabbit and the boy, exactly. They are in the middle and they have the gazes looking at each other, also kind of looking at us. So when I talk to my students about reading picture books, I always tell them to look for movement and look for gazes, because that will really give us some kind of guidance of what to look for and what is important and who is important. Of course, size is important here because they are like the largest figures right in the middle, and the position of them is important. So there are all these cues that will tell us that they matter a lot. But of course, when you are reading picture books, there's a lot of meaning in the text as well. And when you are reading young readers from the Helbling series, you will have an extra kind of layer. If you notice, there's a little bird in a circle, and then there's a speech bubble saying, think, why is the rabbit happy? You will have these little speech bubbles talking to you, the reader, and to your student, kind of engaging them and making the reading experience even a bit more interactive by asking questions for some kind of reflection. So I would just like to point it out that that's part of the book, but it's there for learning purposes. Okay, so there are all sorts of meanings in these books. We will look at them a bit more closely now. So first you have the image and then you have the text. That's a given, we know that. But when you read the text, it will usually tell you something new, some kind of new information. So for this reason, I really like thinking about like what the relationship is between the image and the text as we are reading it, because there might be an information gap, which is really useful when you are reading together in class. There are some picture books which are quite descriptive in terms of language use. And then there are some picture books where you have some kind of excitement, where the story tells something differently or something new that will create really interesting moments for thinking together, discussing, or learning new vocabulary. When I talk about picture books and think about picture books, I don't really like separating image and text, but I like to look at how the two resources together form something new, some kind of new meaning. That's a really exciting thing to explore together. Of course, you will point out different details in the image, and then you will read the text as you do in a language class. But then it's really interesting to put the whole story together and look for this kind of new meaning created by the information gap. There you go. All right. So then you might just want to focus more on the image, and I have collected some ideas that we have been talking about here. I think we have covered all of these. So they are like color, size, proportion, perspective, the gaze, and distance. So when somebody is looking at you, they are drawing your attention in, and they are demanding your attention. When they are looking away, they are kind of directing you towards something interesting and something new. So that's an interesting thing to point out to the students. And also the perspective, because they are almost like eye level. It feels like here that you are there with them, peeking at them, probably from the room. So it's a really nice perspective here as well. So these are just very general and introductory ideas about how to look at picture books and how to look for different types of meaning in them. So they can actually, you can actually talk about all these ideas and all these meanings and ask students how they make them feel and what new ideas they can get out of them. So questions to ask to get started when you take a scene like this to the classroom. What is this scene about? What makes you say that? I always like asking back about like what makes you say that. It's a bit like asking for evidence. It makes the students look, and sometimes they take it for granted that you understand why they say a certain thing, but by making them say it and verbalize it, they will actually practice the language more, and they will understand that seeing is just one way of knowing, and saying is a more specific and explicit way of knowing. So it's really good for language development and thinking development at the same time. But then you can talk about what the mood of the scene is. So what is the mood of the scene? That will make them realize that there is some kind of feeling within the picture and the story. And how does it make you feel? We'll then shift the focus on themselves and let them express their own feelings in relation to the story. And then you can talk about like how the rabbit and the boy are related, and talk about this kind of special relationship between children and their favorite toys. Okay. And here's another summary, which is a more wide-ranging kind of summary for you. What I am proposing here and then what I am showing you here is actually a multimodal reading in which we are learning to describe the body and some kind of awareness of embodied experiences. So we can focus on faces, gestures, body movement, posture, and through this interpersonal relationships. But then we can also focus on colors in the environment and in the characters. And then you can talk about language, what words are said and what meanings are implied by those words and images. And then the sounds. And in the Helbling readers, you will always have the audio recording. Of course, you can listen to that because there will be new meaning in the audio recording in the intonation of the speaker or the storyteller. And then there might be references to different sounds or music within the story. I think it's really nice to pay attention to all these different channels where meaning is coming from. All right. So reading for social and emotional skills covers all these sub-skills that it might be interesting to think about. And you can pick your own goals and you can focus on them. And when you are reading a story, you will immediately understand what the story is good for. So this can be recognizing emotions in stories or empathy and understanding the emotions of the characters. You will experience different perspectives, and you can point out different perspectives in stories and show how you can resolve conflicts and build social skills. You might be dealing with moral and ethical dilemmas in the stories, and a story might give you a good example of how the characters are building resilience, how they are dealing with difficult situations and getting stronger on the way. They are also really good for self-reflection, and they will show you different communication skills. So this is like, I know it's really condensed, but all these different sub-skills and activities and tasks are within each story we are reading. So you can, as I said, pick your own idea and pick your own objective and work around that. Okay. So I am proposing again a view for you, or an idea of like, I'm not saying that we need to shift our attention from language and knowledge building to only emotions, because the social and the emotional and knowledge always come together. But what we usually, when we are reading stories, at least in secondary schools, I think, we look for meanings, and we look for knowledge, and we look for lexical development and learning. But it is equally important to focus on the emotions of the characters and the emotions of the reader at the same time, and kind of extend our focus on language and knowledge building through emotional development as well. Okay, now let's move on to one guided reading practice to see how all these ideas work in action. And this one is a young reader called The Dog in the Box by Rick San Pedro, illustrated by Manuela Scafo. I think it's a really powerful book which actually explicitly works with emotions through a really beautiful story of a little boy who is afraid of the dog, but kind of finds a way to deal with this fear, this kind of fear, and find happiness again and some kind of calm in darkness. The little boy's name is Andy, and you will see first how the colors are guiding them in understanding all these changes in his emotions. If you also would like to check, we have a blog post on this story. It's called The Dog in the Box, Engaging with Emotions Through Stories, where you have more details of how you can work with this story. Okay, so before reading, here when I talk about before reading activities, I'm not talking about before reading activities in the traditional way of building background knowledge, because that's something I think you already do, and you have lots of support in both series, both in the Helbling Young Readers and the Thinking Train series. You will get before reading activities helping you build vocabulary and background knowledge. Here I'm talking a bit more in terms of engaging with the picture book itself. So before reading, I really like looking at the images first. That's what we have been doing so far, and focus on the colors, for example, looking at the characters. And you remember we started with gestures as well. So just to have an overview of what sort of feelings are there already without even reading the words. So if you look at the yellow image, you will see some kind of happiness and friendly gestures, excitement, and playfulness. But then when you look at the little boy in the second picture, he looks smaller. Of course, it's darker, and he looks worried and even a bit scared, because there's something outside, and it's the dark, of course. He's afraid of something like he doesn't know. All right. And while reading, of course, we are going one page at a time, and I like giving time to the students to explore the pages. Someone once told me you can't rush a picture book, and that's very true. I think we need to give the pages and the colors and the details time, and we need to engage them with them slowly, just as if we were reading with a little child, pointing at things, labeling things at first, looking at the colors, finding interesting things, naming them. The best way of vocabulary development, you already know that, I think, labeling, and then we can start telling the story either by reading what's written there, or just saying the story in our own words. I do find that both approaches work very well. Reading the same story over and over again will help students, because students do love repetition, we know. So reading the same story over and over again will give them that kind of comfortable feeling of knowing what comes next, and the rhythm of a story, because these stories have a really nice rhythm to follow, will make it more memorable for them. So they will probably remember expressions and words more easily. But at the same time, it's also really nice to experiment with a freestyle kind of storytelling when you can make your own story, comment on the images, or let the children tell their own versions of the story. Of course, you can also be silly and just invent something really funny and playful together with the students. And then you can just retell the story, of course, using the images. This is something I think we are already doing. Then, while you are reading, you can also, for example, in this one story, focus on positive change only by paying attention to the colors. So on the double pages, we start at 12 o'clock right on top. We will see a happy summer scene. That's something that you have seen in the previous slides. But then we go into pure winter mornings with really white images. And then we are shifting into the dark of the night. But you will see some kind of color. You remember the yellows from the dark image. There's sometimes some kind of hopeful yellow, indicating some sort of safety of the boy's room against the dark of the night. And then there are some scenes in which the little boy needs to deal with his fears. And then when he's finding the solution, you will see both colors, of course, the white and the bright yellow and the dark in the same page. And then at the very end of the story, there is a joyful atmosphere when he has gained some kind of more mature or wise way of thinking. So, and all these feelings are expressed really powerfully through the colors of the pages. So again, when we retell the story, it's a nice way to recall the actual scene through just reminding students of the colors of the pages. All right. I hope you actually got interested in that story and you will check it out. And as I said, you can just go on the reader's blog as well and see a really detailed plan of how you can work with that story. Now, finally, let's look at 3 activities to work with emotions. And the first one is just playing with feelings. You can just simply ask students to write down different emotions from a story you have read together. So for example, if you think back of the very first image that we looked together, you will remember that you all said not angry, shy, or happy, it was angry. And with young learners especially, we can't really talk a lot in our first language, in the second language in English, about the meaning of this word. So why not use more embodied or more creative ways of remembering? You can just ask students to take a piece of paper and make a face to illustrate that emotion. And this is a very simple kind of activity to revise vocabulary, to teach new vocabulary, or just practice showing an emotion. Another one would be discussions and role plays during story time. So I'm using the new class image from the Thinking Train book. I would just stop and check with students to see how the characters are feeling. So we are reading the story. Here's the teacher, he's very loud. That's all that's said in the text. And you remember we mentioned the information gap, how that creates interesting situations. And here's a good example. But when you stop, you can say like, now, how is the teacher feeling and how are the students feeling? And then you might ask, how do you know? If these reflective questions are too difficult in the student's second language in English, then you can just simply ask them in your first language, I think, and then just point out the feelings and repeat the feelings in English. You can then ask how they would respond or behave in the story. That is a really nice kind of engagement. So ask the question, if there was a teacher who was really loud, would you be really surprised, or would you feel shy, or would you find him funny? And then you can act out the whole situation. This is an easy situation to act out in class. So I find, I don't know how you feel about this, but I have been experimenting with quite a lot of acting with primary school students. And I feel that they love replaying the same scene over and over again. So I have used chairs and tables and all sorts of classroom objects to create scenes for the stories we were reading together, and 5 or 6 times they just enjoyed retelling and acting out a situation. So that's just one way, more embodied way of engaging with emotions and using the new language that you are reading and learning from a story. And finally, it is a bit connected to the first activity that I recommended. And this is about letting the students engage with the emotions after story time in multiple ways. I think that sometimes we are too focused on what's going on up here, but in a way that we want students to speak and write. But I think that it's really important to help students engage with new meanings and new vocabulary through multiple channels. So drawing, singing, and movement, or acting, as we said before. So I think it's really good to let students choose an expressive form. And that way, I think they will feel more motivated, but also more comfortable in this kind of story time classroom situation. Okay. I think that it's also important to consider the actual social situation that the students are in, and use the opportunity of the story to talk about accepted behavior in that situation, what could be said, what would you say in your own language, and then what would you say in English in a certain situation, just going back to the classroom situation before. So how would you react? What is the appropriate way to react? And what would you say in Spanish, Italian, German, in whatever first language you're speaking, and in English. So these 3 ideas are very well connected, but they focus on a bit different skills and a bit different objectives. Maybe you have already tried some of these. So I recommend working with them a bit more. And as a kind of summary, I think it's a really interesting and important thing to use stories for deep learning. Not just to fill in time in a course in a way, because sometimes that's when we turn to stories. But I like engaging with the story for several lessons to look at them from different perspectives, look at the story from different perspectives. As I said, stories are really great resources for building knowledge and for language skills as well, but they are also excellent resources for exploring social situations and engaging with emotions. And most importantly, 2 more things I would like to point out. One is that we should use multimodal reading strategies for social and emotional learning, because that's the way that you can actually explore a wide range of meaning-making resources and how they actually work in not only storytelling, but in real-life communication as well, because the gestures are here with us, body movements are here, the colors are everywhere. So what they see on the double page or on the pages of the picture book will be very similar to what they see around them. And by helping students recognize all these resources and make meaning with these resources, they can actually make more interesting explorations in a way, and more they can create, and you can create more memorable situations, learning situations for them. And in this way, when you are engaging with these stories after a reading session, I think it's very important to, just as we focus on multimodal ways of reading, and understanding a story, the expression and the way we talk about and learn through these stories should also be also happen through multiple channels. So let students engage with drawing, movement, singing, and any kind of expressive form that might help them really remember a story and remember new words and new phrases and grammatical structures through them. So generally, we can bring all these pedagogical goals together through storytelling. So thank you for participating, and I ask, because I see 52 comments right now, if you have any questions, or if Lucy, you have seen any questions, it would be the time to answer them now.
Nora, we did have a couple of questions in the chat box. One was about how can this be applied to secondary age students?
Sorry, I didn't hear that. How?
Oh, sorry. How is this applicable to secondary aged students?
I think with secondary age students, you can do even more complex activities. I would do exactly the same. So when we read graphic novels with students, or comic books, because I think they really like, even my university level students really love comic books, and they always bring them to the class to show interesting scenes. We do look at meaning in the speech bubbles, meaning in the text itself, and then there we have a more explicit focus on what is expressed in the images, and then we look at what is expressed in the text. And I think that students generally pay more attention to gestures and feelings expressed through colors and faces and body movements, and by kind of explicitly talking about how they interpret the image, and in comparison to the image, or in relation to the image, the text itself, you have really nice discussions where the students can actually show what they see and what they understand. I just had a couple of really interesting lessons about this. Students had to bring in their own comic books and own stories, and they were showing us exactly this kind of meaningful expression in the colors and in the gestures. And we use this actually for translation practice as well. So even when you do something very specific, storytelling and focusing on and using picture books can help. And just let me give you another example. When I take books like Sendak's Where the White Things Are to secondary school students and do a kind of read aloud session with them, they are just as much engaged as my primary school groups were. It's amazing to see like how shared experiences through story time really engage not just little ones, but also older students. Generally speaking, you can also go into more discussions on social problems and social issues, and what they see in a story and what they see in their own lives. And also, I would even say with secondary students, even philosophical questions are really interesting because I think they can reflect on them even more. And I would use the illustration and the pictures as a kind of reference point or hook to get them engaged, or to talk about the story and retell the story. I don't know if it's an answer that you were looking for, who asked it, but this is what I think right now. Any other question, Lucy?
Would you like to maybe tell people a little bit about the reader's blog? Because lots of people first time they've heard about it, they're very interested in the blog.
Of course, it's been an ongoing project for years and years. So on the Helbling Readers blog, you will find lesson plans, interviews, blogs about methodology, Our lesson plans are very easy to follow. You can just print them out in a way, or just look at them and follow the ideas, or you can adapt, because we have quite a lot of activities and questions there to follow and give suggestions, or you can just pick one theme and take it to the classroom. But there's a lot about how you can use picture books, how you can use illustrated fiction. We have series to follow all through the year. So for example, we had a series with posts each month about the environment, or reading skills development, or skills development today, comparing skills development 20 years ago or in the past, and how in our digital age it has changed. We focus quite a lot on core life skills at the moment. So our series is about core life skills and how you can work with life skills development with primary, secondary, and even higher education students and older students. We have quite a lot about you working with Shakespeare. And I really love our teacher interviews, because we have quite a lot of interviews with teachers about their own reading projects. So you will find quite a lot. I think it's quite nicely organized. So do go and check it out for yourself, please.